Welcome to Dolby Creator Talks. This is a show about how artists use technology to tell their stories, and I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Well, it's January, and that means it's almost time for the Sundance Film Festival. Of course, Dolby will be there, as we are every year, but today we'd like to share an excellent panel discussion from last year's Sundance, where we explored the vital role of sound design and music in storytelling. This panel features filmmakers Shoshannah Stern, who directed Marlee Matlin, Not Alone Anymore, and Dylan Southern, who directed The Thing with Feathers. Both of those films received the Dolby Creator Lab Grant. They both premiered at the festival and were released last year. The Dolby Creator Lab Grant is a program we developed to support independent filmmakers who are using sound and image in unique and powerful ways to tell distinctive stories. And I know by the end of this conversation, you will understand why we selected these two remarkable films last year. If you'd like more information on the Dolby Creator Lab Grant, you can find it at dolbycreatorlab.com. Before we jump in, I want to note that because Marlee Matlin, Not Alone Anymore, is a portrait of the trailblazing deaf actress, and because director Shoshannah Stern is herself also deaf, this panel incorporated a sign language interpreter and live on-screen text transcription, and included a lively discussion about open and closed captioning in film and television. More and more audiences now prefer to watch content with captions on, including many who are not hard of hearing. So I want to ask you, do you tend to watch things with the captions on? Leave a comment down below and let us know why. We'd love to hear from you, no pun intended. And we hope you enjoy this conversation with directors Shoshannah Stern and Dylan Southern. So for both of you, these films represent a new chapter in your careers as artists and storytellers. Dylan, for you, this is a first narrative feature.
Yeah.
And Shoshannah, this is your directorial debut as a director. So both of your films have such a distinctive, powerful approach to the way that they use sound in their storytelling. And you both worked with some amazing sound designers. Shoshannah, you worked with Bonnie Wild up at Skywalker Sound. And Bonnie first got on my radar because she was the sound designer and mixer for The Mandalorian, which was a film that may be a little bit different than your film, but she is just fantastically talented. And Dylan, you worked with Joaquin Sundstrom. Joachim. And he first showed up on my radar because of his association with Andrew Hay. Mm-hmm. They've done some extraordinary films. I think the first really one that I noticed was a beautiful film that they did called 45 Years.
Yeah, with Tom Courtenay. And
That's right. That's right. And so for both of you, especially for the younger filmmakers in our audience, the question of how you choose your collaborators is so key. And so I would love for you both to just speak a little bit about what attracted you to the people that you ended up working with for your sound design. How did you find them? What was it about their work that spoke to you and made you say, that's the person that I want to have work on my film? And Dylan, maybe you can start.
Yeah, I mean, with Joachim, I wasn't sure we'd be able to get him because we were, it was a moderately budgeted independent film, and it just so happened that other people had worked with him before, and he very much chooses projects based on whether he feels passionate about them or whether he feels the filmmakers are passionate about them. And same as you, I loved the work that he'd done with Andrew Hay, and what I loved about it is that he kind of, it's not, everything turned up to 11. He's very subtle where he needs to be, and it's really kind of sophisticated sound design. And this film, because it's so interior and it's all about a very subjective experience, I wanted someone who could come and bring, a very crafted, subtle approach to the sound design and make it big where it needed to be, because there are some spots where the sound is huge in this film, but there's other places where silence and tempered sound are much more important.
Shoshannah, how about you in finding and working with Bonnie?
I had a feeling that I really wanted to work with a woman. And a lot of my production team is predominantly female. and we had really been able to develop a strong dynamic, strong energy, which was so helpful to help the process of our film move along. So then we were going into post, I kind of wanted to keep that energy flowing. And I did try to meet with a couple of other people that weren't female, and I felt like they really viewed my experience as being very different. I felt like I was viewed as being othered, and that's not what I was looking for in a collaborator. I was looking for someone who was really wanting to bring people into the experience. And I think it had helped that when my it hasn't helped that when my experience has been represented on TV, it's typically void and lacking of sound. And when I had been talking with Marlee, within this film, Marlee says, "It's never silent in here." And so I wanted someone who understood that as well, and I was really excited about not the challenge, but the opportunity for us to be able to redefine sound as a means to people who are living within my shared experience. And Bonnie, just from the minute that I met her, she was thrilled, and she was just the right person. And she was really that was one of the best experiences that I ever had working with her. I'm not even kidding.
For both of you, we picked your projects because of the really unique and powerful approach that you had to sound design. So just as a sort of a general question, was there sort of a philosophy or any kind of rules that you had for yourself as you approached the sound design for your films? Dylan?
It's interesting because in my film there's an element that comes into the film early on that is kind of other to the family, that are the main core of the film. And it's kind of this creature that is a representation of the grief that the family are going through. And there was always going to be a guiding principle that the sound of the space they exist in is a really important thing, and that anytime Crow, who is that character, enters, there would be a differentiation in the sound. It would almost suck out the room tone and create take this very ordinary domestic space and suddenly make it feel different to how it had felt in previous scenes. So there was always this principle that sound was really, really important for letting you know when we'd moved into a different mode of storytelling. Then I guess the other thing was that space was really important, and of the characters, the whole family's been through this bereavement, but the boys are existing in a very different space to Dad, even though they're in the same apartment. So we were always looking at ways we could differentiate the sound of the boys' world, which is a world of imagination and a world of kind of escaping their situation through play and through just being young children, versus Dad's world, which is very claustrophobic and very, he's trapped in his own head throughout the film. So it's making sure that A, we were playing with the way the space sounded, but B, playing with it in terms of how it related to different characters. And then on top of that, we enter into some fairly kind of fantastical sequences that are pure representations of the turmoil that Dad's going through, and there the sound becomes much bigger and much more kind of has huge scale. So it was really finding a balance between the domestic and the everyday, and then the more fantastical elements of the film.
Shoshannah, you sort of started to answer this question with your first response, but I'm curious about that sort of your first kind of conversations with Bonnie, and did you have sort of a philosophy about the way you wanted to use sound in the film?
Yes, Bonnie Wild really was able to capture that right away. It wasn't really anything that we had to discuss. That was one reason why I knew that she was going to be a perfect fit. There were some parts of the film, which we will be showing you some clips that we do have that are heavily sound designed, but she saw and was able to capture from the beginning that those quieter moments were really just as important as the ones that were heavily sound designed. And so we did a lot of interviews with Marlee and also some other deaf people in the film where there was no voiceover. We didn't want voiceover. We didn't want an interpreter's voice in there, because then it felt like that was just going to remove or impede on the ASL mouth morphemes that were being used. Like, you have to make noise with your mouth when you're using American Sign Languages. When you're using American Sign Language, Marlee does that moment. That's a really important mouth morpheme. If you have a voiceover, I didn't, someone would say, I didn't want to discuss it. And then you would miss that noise, that sound that ASL makes. And so she knew that she really had to go in and clean up the sound to make it more distinct. Just like she would do with spoken dialogue for ADR or anything like that. So we wanted to leave the background noise in there as well, because usually that gets cleaned up. Like in interviews, you shouldn't have background noises, and we didn't have to worry about any of that. Like one of the interviews that we have with Jack Jason, there's sirens in the background, and we're like, no, leave them. That's fine. That's how we communicate. You can mute them just a little bit more. And so Bonnie Wild was really able to recognize that from the beginning, and it was really fun to work on all those things with her.
I love what you're talking about, and you're setting up the first clip that I want to show. But there's such a playfulness and a joy in your film, and I feel like I love that that sort of montage that you have in the first 5 minutes, where you're miking up the people for the interviews, or you're setting it all up, and I feel like in a very clever way you're telling the hearing audience. You're explaining to us how you're going to tell this story. And it's a really, really lovely way that you do it. And I just was so taken by the way, you filmed the interviews. And as you say, not using voiceover. So the first clip that we have is an extended little piece of one of the interview sequences. And so let's watch this, and then we can talk about it in just a moment.
E-G-T.
She says no.
Watch me talk.
I also love the way you use the split screens in the film. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that idea came to you?
Yes. Visual voiceover is kind of what we used that for, which is usually when we went to show an archival piece. I know that usually people continue to talk and there's a voiceover, and we couldn't do that because we weren't going to have a voiceover with sign language. And so then deaf people have to keep talking, so then you have to continue to see what they're talking about. And so we played with this idea of split screen so that you could keep the language on the screen, the visual language, and then you could also see the archival or the piece as well.
I was so glad when you picked that clip to show, because one of the things that I was so struck by when the film premiered congratulations, by the way, for being the very first film to open the Sundance Film Festival 2025.
Thank you. Thank you.
We were in the Eccles, which, I don't know, 1,600, 1,800 people. It was sold out. It was packed. And these interview sequences come up, and to use I guess a hearing person cliche, you could have heard a pin drop in that theater. Everyone was riveted watching these interviews, and I guess I had a question about like these long moments where there's the interviews without voiceover. How would those play? They played brilliantly in the house, and so kudos to you for having the fortitude to have that decision. It was just fantastic.
Thank you.
One of the things that So the way the Dolby Creator Grant works is Sundance sends us to some films to review and to consider. And Shoshannah, I don't know if you remember, but you wrote us a letter when you made the application for the grant. And in the letter, you talked about how you wanted to use sound design and you wanted to use Dolby Atmos to give a hearing audience the experience that a deaf or a hearing impaired person has about sound. And when I read that, my response was, "Oh hell yeah, I'm here for that. I'm really interested in this because nobody has ever done that before." And so it was so exciting to see you go through this process and to make the film in this way. And I would just love, but before we show the next clip, I would love for you to just elaborate a little bit on that idea about how you wanted to use the sound design to give the experience of how a person with a hearing impairment perceives sound.
I feel like, well, I mean, a lot of us, I don't need to just speak for everyone, but the world of like, so we have a hearing world and then we have a deaf world. But that's not real. We have one world and we all live within it. And we all have different ways of experiencing the same world. Deaf people do experience sound as much as hearing people do. And as a deaf person, I had loved going to theaters growing up because I could hear the sound or feel the sound rumbling under my feet. At my house, I didn't have that type of theater, that type of sound. So there were moments in this film where we had installed a rumble to represent the feeling of mixed emotions or uncomfort whenever you're facing what the world views Marlee should have been, as opposed to who she really was. And it's that tension. I remember feeling that as a younger girl, seeing Marlee facing those interviewers and all the questions that she had to face on her own. And you can see it in her eyes. I had the same experience as a kid, like her tension of, am I wrong because I feel different? Should I believe what they're saying to me? And so I wanted to have that experience become a feeling. So that shows up a couple of times in the film where we have this low, deep rumble. And so one of the things that we had tested before we came to the premiere, which you were there, you were in the room with us during the screening test. I was like, no, I need to feel the rumble through my feet. So bring it up, bring it up, bring it up, bring it up until I was actually able to feel the rumble in my feet. I'm like, yes, that's what we want. But I'm probably saying that phrase just to get the grant. I really just wanted everyone to experience everything the exact same way, deaf and hearing people. I wanted you all to experience it. So, sorry, twisted my words a little.
It's all good. Whitney, I'm going to throw you a little curveball. I'd like to actually show the third clip because Shoshannah just teed it up so perfectly. So what Shoshannah was talking about is there is a sequence. We're going to see the moment when Marlee receives her Academy Award for Best Actress for Children of a Lesser God. And what's interesting about this is what we're about to see is we've actually seen this clip early on towards the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
We see it again later once we've come to an understanding of some of the issues in the relationship between Marlee and Bill Hurt. And so the sound design and the approach to sound in the second time we see the clip is completely different. And there's this wonderful sort of rumble and tone that Shoshannah was talking about to kind of give us, I'm going to stop talking. Just run the clip. Let's experience.
Wait, but before you run the clip, do you mind? Everyone, please uncross your feet. Well, I don't know. Here we don't have the Atmos, right?
We don't have the Atmos, but we might get a little bit. We might get a little rumble.
See. Let's see. Let's just see if you guys can feel the rumble on your feet.
And the winner is Marlee Matlin.
Well, congratulations, we overloaded the sound system in this room. But you did feel that. It's a very powerful moment, and I got a chance to speak with Bonnie Wild, your sound designer, about the work on the film, and I asked her if she learned anything from working with you on the film, and she said indeed that she did, and she said that one of the things that she told me was that she was going to take moving forward. She described what we just saw as almost like a David Lynchian use of a tone to elicit an emotional feeling. And she said she had never gotten to do that before, and she was very appreciative of it. And she said it's something that she wants to take with her into her next projects. So I think it's really fantastic that that you're teaching one of the greatest sound designers in the business to have a new approach to sound. So fantastic, kudos to you. I didn't mean to make you cry. Sorry.
No, I'm definitely not British, because I don't do what the Brits do. Okay. That was wonderful.
So we're going to back up and show the next clip that was up. So this is illustrative of this concept of using the sound design in the film to give the hearing audience kind of the experience of what a deaf person perceives. So this is a really wonderful, very funny sequence where Marlee goes to a family dinner. So let's roll this clip.
We have 5 pizzas for 3 of us.
Yeah. What?
We have 5 pizzas for 3 of us.
Perfect. Go.
We saw your eyes. You want one
I'll
like
take
also?
Mark, do you have like snacks? Honey?
Yeah, it looks so good.
What did you get one, Mark?
Like, now would you like some? Noah? You got this.
You know, Mark, you want that play? Our house, right near our honey.
After clearly bad. How Chloe her? It's bad. Sunder.
Where?
It's Michigan. Yeah. But heavy too.
Who's in the coat takeoff?
Their neighbor in Michigan, an older woman died. She had a dog, and a neighbor took the dog. Now, the man that took the dog died.
Oh.
So if you know anybody, if you know
Did the dog hit him?
if you know anybody who wants, the dog's already killed 2.
I'm curious how did you discuss that sequence with Bonnie, and how did you guide her through ultimately? Because I think that working with sound artists, and Dylan, you could probably elaborate on this, even for a hearing director, it's sometimes very hard to describe sound and what you want out of it. So I'm kind of curious how you articulated that to Bonnie, especially for a scene like this, where you wanted a very specific kind of treatment of the sound.
For me, that dinner scene, yes, it does have some humor in it at the end. That comes from Marlee. I think deaf people often have to use humor to deal with things that they're experiencing over and over and over again. And I knew for people to actually understand what that experience is actually like, and that experience is extraordinarily, as Marlee is, that experience is very ordinary. And I don't know the exact number, but I think 95 to 98% of deaf children are from hearing families, meaning that their experience is just like that, having to work really hard to understand what's happening in the room. I wear hearing aids, Marlee wears hearing aids. We hear, quote, in quotes, and it's always work to have to hear. We have to work to try to lip read, to try to figure out, decipher. We can hear noise, and noises sometimes sound like words, but sometimes they aren't words. So we're having to figure out, what is it? Oh, we catch one word. We are able to decipher what that one is, but then we don't hear any of the other ones. Some of it's gibberish. Sometimes we hear random phrases. We're always trying to figure out what people are talking about. That is exhausting. It's very exhausting. I told Bonnie Wild, I said, I want to have a time jump in this. At the beginning, everything is bright and clear and distinct. You can hear it all. It's all kind of elevated. It's all on the same level of sound. With hearing aids, it's like the plastic crinkling and the dog toes on the ground. All of that comes in at the same wavelength. And so we have surround sound when we go in the theaters, which was really fun because we're like, where's the sound coming from? I was able to say, I want it over there in the front left, or I want it in the back right. Because with hearing aids, I can't localize sound. I can hear people talking, and I'm like, wait, where are they? And then all of a sudden, I'm like, whoa, that sound came from behind me, even though I saw someone talking in front of me. So I'm always trying to figure that out. So we were able to throw sound around in the theater whenever we made this scene. And our sound designer actually went, and she did surgery on spoken words, and then mixed them around, put different syllables in the same places. And so they have the cadence of spoken words, but they're not words. Not decipherable words. And when I watched this scene, it was the first time that I heard how I hear every day and how people who use hearing aids hear sound every day. It was brilliant. But then with the second part that you saw, we are having a time jump. And so she has been working really hard. If you're working really hard, it gets harder and harder to hear. And so then the sound kind of dies out of your hearing aids, comes a little muddled. And Bonnie and I mean, she was just like, yes, we're going to do that. Everything I was like, hey, can we do this? She's like, yeah, sure, we can do it. And so everything I asked for, she did. And I thought I would have to like sit down with her and be like, hey, and spend all this time explaining. And I just told her what I just told you guys. And she'd be like, yeah, great, let's do it. And it was wild. It was wild.
When I saw this sequence, I really understood what you meant about using the technology and especially Dolby Atmos to give that experience, because we get a little bit of a sense in here. This is just a 5.1 room, but in Dolby Atmos, where you can really be very specific about where you place the sounds, it's exactly what you said. Bonnie told me that she had actually tried on some hearing aids and wore them around for a while to kind of get a sense of what that experience would be like. And she said exactly what you said, which is that you lose all spatiality. You don't know where the sounds are coming from. And so this is why I get so excited about this grant and this process, because you as artists are using our technology to tell a story in a completely new and distinctive way. And I'm so appreciative to you for doing this. That wasn't a question, it was just a comment.
I'm so appreciative. I'm so appreciative of it. Like, honestly, whenever I found out that I got the Dolby grant, I laughed. I was like, you're giving the sound thing to a deaf person? Like, but doing that sound mix at Skywalker Ranch, it stretched me. And it changed me. I grew, and now I'm like, wow, doing sound. I enjoyed it so much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone here.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the thing with feathers.
Okay.
I do not have a good segue. Let's just do it. Let's just do it that way. Dylan, one of the first things that I think an audience clocks when they see the film is you shot the film in Academy aspect ratio of 4:3. And so I would love for you to talk just what was behind that decision process. And I'm curious, the decision to shoot the film in a 4:3 aspect ratio, did that affect how you wanted to treat the sound design?
So the decision to shoot 4:3 was based on a couple kind of storytelling factors. The first was that I wanted the space that the characters occupied to feel claustrophobic. We spend an awful lot of time in this amazing apartment set that was built by Susie Davies, the production designer, and it had to feel like a space that they were used to living in, but that was somehow different. And something about that aspect ratio made it feel more enclosed, and it was better for big close-ups. And this film has a lot of big close-ups because it's about something these characters are going through internally. So that was the first reason. The second reason is we have a 8-foot tall crow in the film, and the other characters are a little under 8 foot. So just to get people in the frame with crow, that was another reason. Yeah. And I mean, it was a big question because when, again, I was so excited and appreciative of the Dolby grant, but talking with Joachim about sound design as well, this is an interesting challenge, really, because usually when you think of Dolby Atmos and, that ability to kind of like put sound wherever you want and move it around the space, you think of a widescreen image and you think of, an epic scale. Or that's where your mind would immediately go. And creating Dolby Atmos and sound in a 4:3 aspect ratio, we wondered how much of that would translate and whether the constraints we'd put on the size of the image would put. It was just a question: will it put constraints on the scale and size of the sound? And it was always, when you get to play with a new toy, there's a danger of just getting overexcited and like pushing it too far. And those are the kinds of conversations we had, because the half of this film is grounded in sometimes mundane reality, and half of it is completely ungrounded in reality. So it was how do we use this technology to distinguish between those two modes of the storytelling, and how do we find ways to segue between the two so it's not A, B, it's they're integrated and one creeps in from the other. So yeah, there was a lot of conversations, and it was just really exciting to play with. And yeah.
Well, one of the things that is a commonality between your two films that you're both playing with, I think, so effectively is, just as we saw in that clip with Marlee, you're both using the sound design really effectively to give the audience the experience that your main character is having. And with your film, your main character, Dad, who is played by Benedict Cumberbatch, has just gone through this very traumatic, death of a spouse. And so he's in this grieving process, and he's an artist. And I would say his grip on the line between reality and non-reality gets increasingly blurry as we go through the film.
Correct, yeah.
And that is a paradise for sound design. And you used it so effectively to give the audience the experience that Dad was having. So let's take a look at this first clip.
I've got kids up there. Who is it? Say hello. Are you frightened? Say hello. Say it properly.
That's the first time we see Crow, right?
It is, yeah.
So, obviously, I think the thing that you had to do was get us ready for that moment. So talk a little bit about how you designed that sequence and how you used the sound design to get us there.
Yeah, well, throughout the film, there's this process of going from the exterior to the interior. There's this movement from objective sound to subjective sound, because, these moments that we see in the film are a representation of a sort of something that's happening internally for Dad, and we use sound to give us access to that as a subjective experience. So at the beginning of that clip, when we hear the rustling in the chimney, the idea was very much to, position that noise in the house. It's the thing that sparks Dad's interest. And there's a transition when he goes to the chimney breast and he puts his hand out. And it's done very kind of viscerally there. That's elsewhere in the film it's just more subtle, but with that one, it was just the moment he reaches his hand out, we felt it gave us license to go hard into this more subjective thing, and the sound goes from being inside the chimney breast to suddenly being, and the shots are close up, so suddenly it feels like Dad's in there with that sound, and it gets huge. And there are all these kind of huge contrasts where you go from these abrasive moments that interrupt the flow of the story to kind of jolt you into Dad's perspective. And yeah, it's just a sort of the fun of it was playing with those moments of contrast, and then when we go out into the street, it's a much slower build to that world. And also the placement of Crow's voice, that was the thing that was so much fun to play with in Dolby, was when he gets out onto the street and you can't really make out what he's saying, but it doesn't sound very nice. He has these sort of intimidating, violent streams of words that he's just muttering to himself, and just putting those distant in the street and then changing where they were and creating this disorientating sense. It was fun. It was all that kind of thing of starting the audience in one place and then moving them to another.
There's so much here that's so much fun to unpack. When I started off in the sound business, one of the rules was you don't move the dialogue off of the center channel, because that's where dialogue lives. But you had this great opportunity with Crow, because it's an internal voice, to place it anywhere around, and that you really played with that very effectively.
Yeah, and it's an internal voice until it's not, and when there's a scene that we haven't shown today, but Benedict's in the shower, and the voice starts in his head, but then it stops being in his head the moment you see the silhouette behind this shower curtain of Crow's beak coming through, and suddenly the voice moves beyond the shower curtain, and Crow is actually there. Whether he is or not is by the by. It's just that we've moved into Dad's head at that point, so we can give Crow a real world quality rather than just being this voice that's inside his head.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about is I really love the interplay between sound design and score in your film, and you're operating in a place.
We have the composer in the front row here, Zebedee, just there.
Congratulations. Welcome. That is such a fertile space. I love that space when I'm hearing something and I don't know if I'm hearing music, if I'm hearing score, or if I'm hearing sound design. So can you talk a little bit about your work and how you kind of balance those two very effective, powerful tools, which is the score and then the sound design?
Yeah, it was a difficult one because it's what comes first, sound design or the score, and quite often there needs to be a certain degree of a dialogue going on between sound design and music. And with this one, it was kind of a lot of the score is kind of, drone sounds or arrhythmic drums or things that mirror some of the elements of the sound design anyway. And that was always a real intention, was to be atmospheric with music in a way that allowed the sound design to sit with it and almost become another instrument within the score, and vice versa. So yeah, it was certainly something that I thought about. But it's just that, I had to learn a whole new language for the sound design in the same way that when you're talking to a composer, you can think you know what you're saying, describing some music, and they might not be, describing music in the abstract is quite a hard thing, and everyone's an expert, and, it's, but yeah, I found them very similar on this film, because it was like, I'd really like this to sound like this, but, who knows if that person's this is my person's this.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Was there any coordination between you and the sound designer? Did you guys kind of talk about how the approach was going to go?
We
had everything just kind of show up on the final mixing stage and kind of sorted through it?
We had a sort of unusual process in that the sound design was largely done during the edit with the temp score. So I think when Zebedee got the picture to work with, a lot of the sound design was sort of set in place. But I think the type of music we wanted was very sympathetic to that. And then, in the final days of our mix, we were able to kind of go into the score and, make some, we were in communication with Zebedee all the time and make some edits to certain tracks so that the sound design or the dialogue would sit more comfortably. And there's certain places where we go kind of all the way up to 11 on the score, and there's other places where it's much more dramatically effective to just drop it out and let sound design do all the work.
And when you say the final days of the mix, you mean last week?
Yes, last week. Well, week before last. I think, yeah, it's fine.
We have one more clip, which is Dad is in the supermarket. Do you want to set this up?
Yeah, I mean, this is another sort of how do you make a really mundane location suddenly feel threatening. And I don't know if we go all the way to the end of this clip.
We don't. We kind of cut off. It's midway through.
Because it goes further than this, but this is just the sort of transition from the everyday to the uncanny. And where it goes beyond where this clip stops, one of the aspects of grief or any kind of like traumatic thing I wanted to look at was the way that anxiety can affect you. And the scene builds into a kind of representation of a panic attack, like just in a very ordinary space. And this is a kind of build up through Crow's arrival at somewhere that Dad really doesn't want him to be.
Dad's never excited when Crow shows up, but especially not in public.
He grows to love him, though. So, but yeah. I mean, this is a slower kind of move from reality into unreality, and the sort of transformation of a space from an everyday space into something far more kind of threatening and unknowable.
Let's watch the clip.
There he is. Sad Dad. Doctor, I think I'm being followed by a crow.
You're not fucking real.
Stick to routines, is that what he said? The children need routines. Not those boys. Those boys need bows and arrows, they need stories, they need myths, they need chaos, they need crow.
You're not real!
And it gets crazier from there.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. That was one of the moments actually where I really said we got one of my favorite actors to voice Crow, David Thewlis.
I wanted to talk with you about David Thewlis and the voicing of the Crow. This is one of the creepiest, eeriest vocal performances I have ever heard. So was there, I mean, when you were working on the script, did you know that that's who you wanted to get? Was there ever any doubt in your mind?
I had, so one of my favorite films is Mike Leigh's Naked, and I just had David Thewlis does that whole speech where he goes, "What's up, what?" And that was in my head when I was writing, and it was like, whenever I would write new lines for Crow, it was just David Thewlis saying them. So I was over the moon when he agreed to do it. But yeah, there was something about the rhythm of the lines that he was saying, and I was like, to Zebedee, the composer, I was like, this would be amazing if there was something rhythmic in the score that, you know, that either went, I think I said on the offbeats in between the words, and Zebedee tried that and it wasn't quite right, and then he came back with the beats hitting the words every single time, and that was kind of as we were mixing. So we were always kind of in a dialogue between what the sound was doing, or what the dialogue was doing, and what we could do musically, and how it all kind of fit together. So yeah, I think that's where dialogue, sound design, and music are all kind of in sympathy with each other to get us to and also the way that the camera moves. So everything was working together to bring us to that sort of crescendo where he stops and, you know, things are about to change.
David Thewlis's performance is so extraordinary, and I'm thinking of that sequence where Dad kind of gets drunk alone, and Crow starts to vocalize his interior self-hatred monologue. Did you?
That's actually my self-hatred.
Did you record David before you shot, or what was Benedict working with?
On that day, I was saying it to him, I think.
Because it was your monologue.
Yeah. Originally, David was going to be on set doing the voice, but that didn't quite work out with scheduling. So quite often it was it was a sort of David Prowse, Darth Vader situation with the guy who was actually in the Crow suit. But we always knew it was going to be eventually replaced. But so Benedict's performances are incredible because quite often it was a monotone Brit just mumbling the lines off the page. So he did an amazing job.
Yeah. You had this ability to go huge with the sound design because you have these very intense internal moments that you want to stage. And you were talking earlier, you reminded me of like one of my favorite quotes from the legendary sound designer and editor Walter Murch. And he talks about that the audience will accept, he talks about sound as the back door that information comes to the audience, almost like the front door is the eyes. But he said because it's coming in through the back door, the audience will accept a level of abstraction in the sound design that will surprise you what you can get away with as a storyteller. And I feel like you use that so ably.
Yeah, I mean, it's so amazing what you can do with sound and how you interpret it. And, you know, if it especially when it's coupled with an image, your brain will tie things together in a way that you if you just heard that sound alone or just saw that image alone. So it's incredible. It's such a true thing that will emerge.
But one of the things that you both play with, I feel, is, you know, you've got a lot of big moments, but you've also got a lot of really subtle moments that I didn't really catch the first time I watched the film, but it was only on second viewing. Like, I love the way you use the boiling tea kettle to kind of punctuate these emotional moments. You know, there's that moment where, you know, Dad is just trying to keep it together and the boys are acting up and he yells at them and then he feels bad. And then the only thing that we hear is a boiling tea kettle off in the background. And it's such a great metaphor for his mental state at that point.
Yeah. And also, I love tea, so it's
probably the film is set in England. So of course, the electric tea kettles.
Yeah, we had a comment on that last time we viewed it, about how quick that kettle boils, because he switches it on, and 30 seconds later, it was a poetic license.
Movies are magical.
Yeah.
And it reminds me, Shoshannah, of something that Bonnie told me about your film. She said that one of the things that she learned from the process that she will take with her is just to be very intentional with the sounds. And she said something that was very interesting. She said that because of your decision that the film would be open captioned, so your film will only be presented with open captions to make it accessible to the widest possible audience. She said, I realized very early on that if I put a bunch of sound in it, that would all be captioned and it would be a bunch of text on the screen, and it would be super distracting. So she said it actually became kind of a liberating exercise in how little can I get away with to communicate this, which again, that's something that you taught her in this process, which is fantastic.
Oh.
Let's open up and take some questions. I can't see anything, so can we turn the lights up just a little bit? Yeah, I see a hand up here in the back.
My question was for Shoshannah, as far as being a first-time director and a female director and a director with a disability. How did you navigate the world of collaborating, especially when it would seem so obvious for someone to question you or push back or not maybe give you the space to hold your vision, which clearly is absolutely brilliant. I mean, it's phenomenal. So yeah, I guess that's my question.
I wish I knew how to answer that. I think really it has to do with picking a team. I think what's really helped was to have a majority of females on our team. I think that women are always very conscious of how much space we take up. You know, men are allowed to manspread. They're allowed to take up space. They're allowed to talk for a very, 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 very long time. They are. And so I tried to have discussions and conversations with men that we were interviewing. And there were some men that we accepted on our team, even though they were men. We were very tolerant. We're a very tolerant female team. But in the discussions, yeah, you know, we have to listen. We have to listen to each other. And so even though people are pushing back and say, don't you mean, which I call hearing-splaining. And so if you are hearsplaining, it means that you're not willing to share space. And that is something that I have to be intentional about, because we're telling a story of a woman who really needs time for her to reclaim her own story and give her her own space. And so we have to make sure that that really does lead at every level that we had to have that space. And so we made sure to hire people that found that as an opportunity, as a chance to have a conversation, have a chance to relearn and learn how different people navigate spaces, this space that we all live in.
Great answer. Another question. Yeah, right here in the front.
I really enjoyed this panel. I know that a lot of times there are different groups of hearing people, groups of deaf people who want to explore sound, they want to play with captions. And so let's just say, if we assign you guys to work together on a project, what would you guys want to explore or not want to explore with sound and captions? You go first.
I mean, I was so fascinated listening to everything about Shoshannah's film, so I would open the space out to you. So.
Really, one of my hopes in this film is that, you know, with sound, you know, it's so fortunate that, you know, the world just accepts sound as being normal, natural, that it's important, and that we must invest a lot of time and energy in sound. And so that's why we have the Dolby Grant. And there are many films that really do get to benefit from that grant, and we recognize that. And that is really a big part of the film for everyone. One area where I feel like we are lacking, and it kind of is a missed opportunity for us to add another layer of the cinematic experience, is regarding captions. Really, you can use captions to push the narrative in really creative ways. And that's usually lacking, because a lot of people have this idea that accessibility, what a pain, we have to do it. But no, that's how it's been for a long time, the standard. Like, I remember when before we had curbs that didn't have ramps, and people were like, you want a ramp on the curb? Seriously? Every curb, you need a ramp? Really? And now we all do use the ramps on the curbs. We all have suitcases that we drag around. We all have strollers that we push. And so I feel like accessibility really does create a better world for all of us, the same one that we all live in. And it's really fun to think about captions from the beginning, before you start shooting, making sure that you have space to put them, making sure that you can play with placement, play with color, caption this person, maybe what their essence is within the color of the caption. Maybe captions can be in line with music, they can fade, they can come in sharp. There are so many ideas that I have for captions. Like in watching your film, I'm like, ooh, we could caption this way. This could be really cool. Like, what if the crow's captions had feathers and then they fluttered all around the screen? Like, I would love for every filmmaker to start thinking about captions in that way, in a way to push their narrative, push their ideas more.
And so I was stalling for time there. So, but in answer to the original question, I'd absolutely love to collaborate. But one of the things in my film is that Dad is a graphic novelist, and I made him a graphic novelist because I've always been obsessed with that as a medium, which is a purely visual medium. But the use of captions in that is always like incredibly fascinating, and just the way that paneling, like you've done with the split screen in your film, you know, and I love the way that the interaction from one side of the panel to the other pushes it off screen. I think there's so much stuff that you can do visually and with language in films that we just don't see, because it's so much about just dialogue or just sound effects. And I agree. I think there's so much more to explore in that world.
The question was for the two of you, but I want to say, just as I love what you're saying, and it reminds me of an experience that I had a couple years ago. We do these live webinars on Sundance Collab, and they're really fascinating conversations with filmmakers about both sound and image. We did one a couple years ago. I will not name the filmmaker. But before we went live with the webinar, they wanted to test the clips, and Sundance had open captioned the clips. And the filmmaker said, can we turn that off? Because they found it visually distracting from what was happening. And, you know, the person from Sundance was very gracious and said, we do this for accessibility reasons, and you know, the filmmaker backed off. But it made me think about their reaction to it, and it made me realize that I think one of the reasons why filmmakers, you know, a lot of filmmakers push back on open captioning. And I think maybe one of the reasons why is because, to your point, the captions could be a lot better. And it's especially bad when the caption shows up before the event happens on the screen, right? So I think this is a whole new world for us to explore, which is, and your film is a great example of leading the way of how do we use this? This is another storytelling tool. And how do we use this intentionally and creatively and not think of it as an accessibility thing that we have to do for an accommodation purpose, but to make it part of the creative storytelling. So this whole experience has been just fascinating for me, and I'm a huge fan. So thank you.
The reason why we have captions at all is the reason sitting in the room, and it's because of Marlee. And so that idea for captions, like, yes, that's been in me, but I always think about what are better ways for us to push captions forward in films. And Marlee has been doing that ever since she was a young woman. She's still the youngest actress to have ever won an Oscar, still. And at such a young age, she pushed and pushed for closed captions, for those to be on TV and in movie. And so, like, in the movie about her pushing the idea of captions, we had to push it a little further. Hold on. I was a judge here at Sundance 2 years ago. And for the dramatic feature category. And obviously, I need captions in order to judge films. And before I got here, they told me that I was guaranteed captions for fair judging. For every film, there were going to be 12 films. And to be able to do my job fairly for all of the filmmakers. And day one, I was given a captioning device, and it was broken. It did not work. So then I had to take it out, and we had to pause, and then I was brought another captioning device. It also was not working. Then I was brought a third captioning device, and it still was not working. And then the picture came on. And so then there were judges sitting on either side of me, and so then I had to walk out. Wait, Carrie needs to clarify. They walked out, you walked out. Oh yeah, I walked out. I stumbled out. Then we had other films, and they were fine. They had films that actually had open captions within the film on the screen, which I was thrilled about. The movie would start, the picture would come on, and then it would stop. The filmmaker would get up and say, stop, stop, stop. No, no, no. I don't want that. I don't want the captions. And they would stop the film. And they kept saying it's ruining the artistic design of the film. Like, okay. So it's still a struggle. It's still a struggle to this day. And so I'm just going to leave it at that.
So as a deaf individual, and hearing about your life and your lived experiences, which are very similar to mine, what fascinates me about your film, Dylan, is a lot of that description. And I feel like we're in an age where we see this more and more and more. And so how do we push these captions? How do we push for these things to truly make a difference and show our world view and experience? What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I do have a
with
thought.
sound description as well.
Yeah, I do have a thought on that because I think more time should be given to directors to work with the people who are actually making the captions, because I remember getting sent only a couple of weeks ago the list of captions, and this is while we're doing the mix and while we're prepping for Sundance. And I was trying to steal time whenever I could to go through the captions and say, well, that's not quite right, or that's not what's said there, or a better description of that sound in the background would be this. And I feel like, to me, and this is my only ever experience of it on a dramatic feature, it's not that it's an afterthought, it's just that it's kind of given off to someone else to do and then sent back to me for approval. And I don't think I had quite enough time to have the diligence I should have had to go through that and make sure everything was, because I wrote the film as well. So being able to write in, intention to these sounds, it's fine to say ominous sound, but that can be a very nuanced thing.
You can come up with something better than just ominous sound, right?
Well, yeah, I'd have to think for a bit, but.
But I think also, your experience was even maybe a little unusual, because I think a lot of filmmakers don't ever see the captions. Yeah. It just, they.
Well, I requested it because I was sort of worried about, there's some dialogue in there that Crow says that, if they wrote it all down, it would be nonsense because he's just muttering away, and I just wanted to make sure that there was clarity and intention in everything. But so I asked to see it, and then I could have spent a week going through it and just making sure and I'd have liked to have done that, but there wasn't a week left, so
that's.
But you were intentional. You were intentional. You put thought into that, and that's more than what most other filmmakers are doing. So that is great. You were very intentional. I also do want to make sure that I give credit to the person that did our captions. We hired a deaf artist who is also a female, Allison O'Daniel, and her film had premiered at Sundance 2 years ago in the next category, and it was called Tuba Thieves. She is an amazing art.
Is that what you said?
Tuba Thieves. That's what I said.
I love that film.
Yes.
Sorry, I got excited for a second.
Me too. I loved it too. And so I think, we were looking at captions not just as a reason for accessibility and somebody sitting there who doesn't really need captions writing them. And so it was nice to hire people who really do think about captions and who do want to express them in better ways. We have deaf writers, deaf artists, and being able to collaborate with them and the creators I mean, that can just be a really amazing experience going forward.
So, do you have a question over there?
Hi. I wanted to ask if either of you had any thoughts on a debate that I've been seeing online a lot lately has been how, I guess, verbatim captions versus getting the sentence and the gist of what a character is saying across in slightly different words than what they used in order for speed or visibility or whatever it is. I just wanted to see what you guys were thinking about it because it seemed relevant.
I think if it's heard, you must caption it. It's like if I was using sign language and I just said, hey, can you just do a summary? Can you just summarize that? I'll just sign. We can't do that. But at the same time, I know that there is opportunity for creative license where you can, like, for example, like put muddy voices in parentheses. We use that in our film. Words without shape, we use that as well. Because not all sound has a word to match it. But our rule for sound design and then also for captions was if you hear it and it's distinct, you need to caption it.
I would say within my film, that thing about whether it should all be verbatim or not did come up because there are moments where we hear Crow's voice, and the book that this is adapted from is all about this beautiful language that Max Porter, the author, used for Crow, and it's rhythmic and poetic and violent, and sometimes it's in the distance in the film, and I worried about putting everything he said verbatim in case it took on too much importance when someone's reading it, because it isn't narrative and it isn't progressing anything. It's more about tone and atmosphere. But then it comes back to what Shoshannah was saying about if you could have fun with those captions, if you could do something animated with Crow's voice, the way that those rhythmic, kind of poetic, dark, dangerous words came onto the screen, that would be amazing, because it would tell you that these are serving a function of rhythm rather than content. So I think, in the future, exploring stuff like that would be amazing. Like if there was a facility to kind of like almost animate the text in a way that suits how it's occupying the space, that would be so much fun to kind of play with and to look at.
I think this is a really fertile ground to play with and explore, because I mean, I don't know about the rest of you in the audience, but I often watch television with the captions on, even though I can hear it just fine, because it's just a it's just a different way to engage with the material.
I just wanted to make a point, actually. So I'm Mir Bays, and I'm the director of the Filmmaking Fund at the British Film Institute, and we funded The Thing with Feathers. And we are a public fund, so public fund, it's not taxpayers, it's lottery money. Those exist in the UK and obviously in Europe, not in America, sadly. And I just wanted to make the point, actually, around accessibility, that funders have a duty as well to, so as a funder that serves the public, it is our duty that filmmakers have to deliver accessible versions, that whenever they play festivals, they have to play accessible versions, audio description, subtitled, etc. Often relaxed screenings for people with ADHD, etc. So also, I just wanted to make the point that people who pay for, distribute, sell movies also have a duty to serve the public in entirety. To your point, so we all need to do this work together. It's not just beholden on filmmakers, because often they just don't fully understand what the intentions are. So I just wanted to make that point.
Well said. I think we've got time for one or maybe two more questions. I see a hand right here.
Hi, I got the opportunity to see both of your guys' films. I think they were the best of the festival, so congratulations. I also
Can you say that again? I didn't.
best of the festival. And I also was going to make the point too, I think a lot of us watch with closed captions, so it should be there. But I wanted to ask, about with grief in your film. You capture it so beautifully through sound. I wonder how long it took you to like get there, because I felt like when I was watching it yesterday that like it sounded like grief. Like I could feel the grief in it, and I was just curious how long it kind of took you to get to that sound.
Yeah, I always had ideas about it, and I don't know if it's a musical thing or whatever, but I always associate sound with time. And in the early days of writing the script, I read a book by a writer called Denise Riley called Time Lived Without Its Flow, which is a really beautiful book about, she lost her son, her teenage son, and she talks about the temporal quality of grief, that time can slow down and dilate, or it can suddenly move really fast and days have passed and you don't know what's happened in them. And it's a weird one, like to talk about sound in terms of time, but that's one of the things that I said, and there's moments where it's really subtle, but we slow down a clock in the room, and like you probably wouldn't, consciously notice it, but the idea was that there are things that are different in this space to a regular space. They're really, really subtle, maybe too subtle, but that was a real thought. It was, what does grief sound like? And sometimes it's numbness. It's like the voices in the next room. Usually your brain would be sharp enough to tune into them. Like I'm always listening out for what my kids are up to, because I don't want them to hurt themselves. But there's something about grieving where you're in a bubble, and a big part of thinking about the sound on this film was, well, how can we recreate that subjective experience, especially when with the dad character. So thank you for noticing that, and there was a lot of intention and a lot of conversations, and I couldn't always describe it perfectly, because it's like describing music. It's really hard to describe in the abstract, but having collaborators who are on the same wavelength and could kind of really key into what I was getting at was amazing, and there was a lot of kind of thought in that process.
We have time for one more question. I see a hand right here.
Yes, hello. I do have a question for Sho. With your film being a documentary, how did you explore sound with your subject? Did you discuss this with Marlee and talk about what sound Marlee had in mind, because it's about her lived experiences, or did you move forward with sound without involving her? I'm just curious, because a documentary is very different from a narrative where the director has more control. So did you bring other people into your film in regards to sound?
I think that is one thing. Coming into documentary, like previously I'd been a writer, and I'd been a writer for a while, got into documentary, and that concept of objectivity versus subjectivity is a little bit was a challenging thing for me to navigate, because we're working with PBS for this film, and so there were a lot of things we had to navigate with public funding. But it's an interesting thing, because the definition of subjectivity is subjective, And so feeling like sound perspective within this movie, like with the dinner scene, people were feeling like it wasn't objective. And I'm like, objective for who? It's objective for her experience. But at the same time, Marlee really has always been brave for such a long time. And I knew that about her, but I was overwhelmed by just how brave she has been with this process, because she just said, here's my story, here's my life, you make it, make the film, make something with it. And I know that she was ready for someone who shared her experience. We have a lot of themes in life that are parallel. We're deaf women, and then within that deaf space, of course, there's a spectrum, but it just so happens that both of us wear hearing aids. I'm not always sure if all hearing aids or people who wear hearing aids experience the world in the same way. I don't think that's the case, but I did try to approach this sound design as a writer, and I feel like you can really do your best writing if you do make it personal. If you do relate with it with your own emotions, I do feel like other people can access it too. So I hope that answered your question.
That's great. I'm going to wrap with one final question for the both of you. I'm very curious, after having gone through this process, done these first features for you, what did you learn about sound and storytelling that you'll take with you on your next films? Whoever wants to jump into that one first.
I learned a huge amount because I'd done music documentaries before, which were a lot of it was just like, are we EQing the music right, and is the artist going to be happy with it? And there were elements of storytelling within the sound design on those documentaries, but nowhere near as much as like coming into this dramatic feature. And so it was like school for me, and I was sort of just considering elements of sound that I'd never considered before. So from the positioning of it, from how like making a voice distant or closer, or even in scenes where we've got the kids wandering around and they're not sure where Crow is in the room, and just seeing the difference between moving the voice to camera left or camera right, and just it was just so much exploratory fun. I don't think I could sort of pinpoint one specific thing, but I learned to appreciate the sort of aspects of sound as storytelling in a way that I hadn't before, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
You also write, so I wonder if you'll be thinking about sound as you write on your next projects.
Definitely, yeah.
I learned everything. Like I said, I was like, me, a deaf person, you want me to go into the sound mix? That was I just felt like it was a setup for a bad joke. But it wasn't a joke. It was real, and I really just loved it. I loved it. I found it, I connected to it. I felt like it connected to writing. It connected to me as a person. Really just my whole experience as a woman, and I don't know. I mean, all of it. That was just something that I literally never imagined myself doing. Let's go, Shoshannah, you're deaf. Come sit at the soundboard. Can you touch these buttons, make it louder? Like, I never imagined that. It just when I have to zoom out and look at the bigger picture, I just wonder how many people will ever experience that or will never experience that. Because a lot of times people say, oh, you're deaf, that's not going to be for you. Let's let somebody else who can go in there, So that I really learned, like, how can I make sure that the experience that I had because of this grant, like, how can I make that possible for more people to come after me, more people like me to come after me. I am where I am now because of Marlee Matlin. She made this decision. And that idea of generations to come, that kind of stuff, it's also a big theme in our film as well. And so that's what I was left with. When I went to Skywalker Ranch, that's going to stick with me forever. I think that's always going to be with me.
That's great. Thank you so much, both of you. This has been it's been a fantastic conversation. There are some acknowledgments I would like to make. There is an amazing team of people here at the box who put these conversations on. I want to acknowledge Chandler Arnold, Lisa Marie Provo, and the amazing Whitney Miller, who has been running our AV. I want to thank our ASL interpreters, Robbie, Tony, and Carrie today for their fantastic work. Thank you. And finally, Dylan and Shoshannah, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us today and sharing your experience. And this was a really fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for making the time. Dylan, I want to say, we'll give him a round of applause. Dylan skipped a Q&A for his own film to be here, which is playing right now. So Much gratitude to you. Thank you so much.
No worries.
Wow. Thank you, Dylan.
Many thanks to Shoshannah, Dylan, and Marlee Matlin for joining us for that excellent panel discussion. And an extra special thanks to our friends at Sundance Film Festival for helping us put that panel together. We will be heading once again to Park City later this month. Be sure to check out Marlee Matlin, Not Alone Anymore, and The Thing with Feathers, both of which received the Dolby Creator Lab Grant, which gives resources to finish independent films in Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos. We will have links, as always, in our show notes. And if you'd like even more conversations with artists and filmmakers about how they use technology to tell their stories, be sure you are subscribed to Dolby Creator Talks. You can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube, in our show notes. Or you can simply search for Dolby wherever you get your podcasts. If you're curious to know more about what we do at Dolby Creator Lab, head on over to dolbycreatorlab.com. There you'll find information about all of our programs. You can access the entire library of episodes of the show, and you can sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, this is Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Karen Kahn. Thanks for joining us.